Welcome to Make Your Money Matter with Brad Barrett, the show that aims to change the way you think about wealth management. Brad is a certified financial advisor, established radio host, and author of Retire Right. He is a managing director and partner at One Capital Management, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm managing over $4 billion for clients across the nation. Brad and his team are dedicated to helping clients protect and preserve their assets so they can reach their investment and retirement goals. And now, your host of Make Your Money Matter, Brad Barrett.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining me on Make Your Money Matter. Today, we're going to be going through the 6 things to avoid when it comes to investing in the stock market. But before we do that, do us a favor and smash that subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. All right, let's get into it. Do you ever have trouble getting started tackling a project? Any husbands out there has those honey to-do lists? I know I have them every weekend. My wife keeps coming to me with honey to-do lists, and I love it, don't get me wrong, but it's almost like I'm waiting for that perfect time to get that list done, which never really seems to come. Or maybe for some of us, I know I fall into this camp too, our pursuit of perfection tends to end in utter frustration. Well, look no further, because today I want to talk about having less frustration and increasing our happiness when it comes to our money and the growth and the investing around it. And a lot of times what happens to the perfect antidote, if you will, is to help address investment concerns. Because again, today we're gonna be sharing the 6, what I'll call common investor snags to avoid getting tangled in. And I've had no shortage of reasons from investors over my 18 years of being a financial advisor as to why they cannot get their financial house in order. And while the art of procrastination can take many forms, a common theme I've noticed is really the quest for perfection. Investors, all of us, typically look for this ideal set of circumstances, which never really seem to materialize. So they keep putting off the important planning that actually needs to get done. And this search for perfection is similar to, let's say, the world of dating, where searching for that perfect mate or companion or partner can be somewhat, or can seem like, a hopeless endeavor. I know for me in my early 20s, Veronica, my wife now, I was basically living at my parents' place, starting my financial advisory practice, focusing all of my efforts, time, and energy on building the right practice for my clients. And in my mind, I was so focused on making sure that I had that in order first before I was able to go into any relationship, which ended up being my wife. Now, thank the Lord, Veronica saw right through that and said, no, I like you and you like me, we're going forward. And I'm so grateful she did, because embracing the understanding that every person has flaws, no matter the relationship, and embracing that truth can ultimately lead to really a courtship and a relationship, which hopefully leads to a successful marriage. Now, in many facets of life, and I bring that example up, the quest for perfection is really the enemy of progress. And this is especially true in the world of personal finance, which is why I want to talk about it today. And this list that I'm going to go through highlights several areas, in my opinion, within the search for perfection that actually prevent people from, let's say, pulling the trigger on a financial strategy or even sticking to a financial strategy, and why you should be aware of these traps. We need to talk about them and not let them inhibit their ability to achieve your financial objectives. So if you haven't guessed by now, waiting for that optimal time to invest is actually investor snag number 1. A prospective investor actually recently called me to confess that they really need to start investing, since most of their wealth, which is outside of their business, is actually sitting in cash. So after inquiring during my discovery as to how much cash was actually sitting on the sideline, they actually told me about 7 years worth of expense money was sitting on the sideline. You heard that right, 7 years of expenses. They told me that they weren't comfortable with what's happening in the market and are waiting for things to settle down. Now, let me stop for a second. Does that sound like some of you watching right now or listening? So while keeping that level of cash on hand is an extreme example, I think, it is actually common. And I want to be open about that. We see it all the time here at One Capital Management when we're doing our discovery meetings. It's common for people to want to wait for an ideal time to put their money to work. But in truth, there's never a perfect time to invest. There will always be some type of turmoil in the world that gets people nervous and gets their attention. We are seeing it right now in the early part of 2022. We've seen it in the past 2 years in particular, everything from war, geopolitical risks, market gyration, increasingly high prospective stock valuations, a global pandemic. I mean, there's plenty more. So trying to time the market for the best entry point could actually really just lead to years of waiting. So that's number one. Number two dovetails off number one. It's searching for the perfect investment. So we're trying to find this perfect time, and then we kind of go into the perfect investment. Look, every investment, as we know, anyone watching this or listening here right now, every investment carries risks. And I think everyone should know that if they don't know that. Sometimes investments work out and sometimes they don't. That's just reality. The purpose of taking risks is to what? Generate a return on one's money. So an investor who spends an enormous amount of time searching for the perfect investment opportunity, namely one that provides high returns with no risk, is actually a fruitless pursuit. It's a unicorn. It doesn't exist. It's far better to spend time developing a strategy that provides a high probability of achieving an investor's financial objectives. And this is done by clearly defining your goals and your risk profile, and then outlining an overall asset allocation and a sensible plan to get you there. Now, I'm not talking about some sensible plan like you buy a car and, oh, that's a sensible option. It's okay to want the Range Rover. I'm not saying you shouldn't want that Range Rover in your portfolio, but understand that you need to build out your planning with some sensible items in there so that you're not just sitting on the sidelines waiting for not only the perfect time, but also the perfect investment. All right, number three on the 6 things that I think investors should avoid when it comes to an investment strategy, or the snags in an investment, is insisting on getting the best price. Now, I want to clarify one thing on this number 3, this topic. My grandfather always told me, you always make your money on the buy. And in my early careers as an investor and as an advisor, I really focused on making sure we found the right investment purchase price. And we do that from fundamental investing through understanding price to earnings multiples, earnings per share ideas, fundamental analysis that says the dollar I'm going to invest today will be worth X amount in a reasonable time period. But if we delay on just focusing on that best price, we might lose some great opportunities. So I always say this, after agreeing to an investment strategy with a client that we do here at One Capital Management, sometimes, believe it or not, investors are still hesitant to actually implement it. Again, success and failure is defined by actually taking action. So they'll often say things like what we discussed, they like it, they understand it, but let's keep an eye on the market or the investments, Brad, to see if the market drops below a certain price. Then give me a call. We'll actually go through with that investment policy statement and we can move forward. Does that sound like something you might do? I mean, 2020 a couple of years ago was a great example. I can't believe, by the way, I'm saying 2020 was a couple of years ago. I swear it still feels like it was yesterday. I mean, remember, in March of that year, during the pandemic, the market dropped nearly 40%. And many investors understood that, many, I think, cognizant investors at the time, us included here, understood that adding money was actually a good idea because the stock market at that time was trading well below its highs. It was a good price. However, taking that plunge, actually adding money to the market, proved to be actually more difficult for a lot of people. I've done a lot of discovery meetings from our radio programs, from our podcast, and now from the show around discussing what they were doing in times like that. I mean, the last time we had that example was 2008 during the recession. And this again, by the way, I'm bringing this up because it's one of the reasons why having a good investment manager, a good advisor, also happens to be really good advocate for you to have in your corner during exactly times like March of 2020, recession of 2008, because it's human nature to want the best deal. I get it. I mean, we all want the best deal. We want to feel like we got the best deal when we're looking for the perfect price. Anyone out there, whether you're buying a car or buying a stock, you want the best deal. It just makes sense. However, what I'm trying to say in item number 3 here is waiting for a stock in a particular trade at some arbitrary price often leaves the investor pretty much waiting indefinitely. So you want to be really careful there. So if you have a prudent strategy in place, something that we here at One Capital Management define for our clients, something we do, what we call our investment policy statement, an IPS, and an allocation for an overall investment strategy that fits into your overall wealth management strategy, then hoping for the market to trade at certain levels is actually ill advice. You actually want to kind of move through pragmatically with the plan, avoiding market timing, but actually focusing on time in the market. Moving forward immediately with your strategy is generally the right decision because you can't time when you choose to find an advisor. You can't time when you all of a sudden feel like starting to invest. You just have to start. Warren Buffett once said, there seems to be some perverse human characteristics that likes to make easy things difficult. Don't make investing more difficult than you have to make it. Understanding your long-term strategy and staying steadfast in your systems will prove to be vital to the success of that plan, of that investment, and of that portfolio. So market timing and insisting on getting the best price, it can be a slippery slope. And this leads us into the fourth topic I want to bring up when it comes to avoiding things when it comes to investing, and that is the desire to create the perfect portfolio. Perfection can be a downside here. There's an infinite amount of literature on portfolio construction. I mean, look, do a quick Google search or a YouTube search here on the platform, and you will find white papers, write-up articles, books to buy, videos to watch, all about how to construct the perfect portfolio. And I say this often, everyone's financial journey is different. So what you'll find in those Google searches will be portfolios that are actually individualized and actually in that category, more generalized. Now, these portfolios, they may be reasonable. I'm not saying they're not, but the more you read and learn and research, the more you'll conclude that there is no one correct way to invest in the market. I want to say that again. There is no one correct way to invest in the market. There are only wrong ways, believe it or not. It's irresponsible to develop, for example, an over-concentration in any given stock or sector or industry. Warren Buffett, speaking to him, would actually speak to the contrary on that. But I always say it's interesting when you look at it because unless you're going to drink one Coke for lunch and a hamburger every day and live in the same house you lived in for 40 years, you may not be on the Warren Buffett train. I know it's shocking, but everyone loves to kind of use it. And I love Warren Buffett. I love what he does. But you have to understand, it's like a few months ago, the Masters was on. And if you look at Tiger Woods, after all he's gone through, everyone says, oh man, I want to be as good as Tiger Woods, or I want to be as good as an investor as Warren Buffett. Do you really? Do you understand what they've had to give up or sacrifice to do that? Again, I'm not saying it's bad, but you have to really understand what you're going for. So to be over-concentrated, in my example about Warren Buffett, who actually speaks more about concentration than he does about diversification, there's a difference between being a Buffett and being a portfolio manager and understanding diversification to subordinate your risks as you build an overall portfolio. And furthermore, allocating your capital exclusively, say, to illiquid investment vehicles like real estate or esoteric and unregulated opportunities that are also out there may not be the most recommended for most investors as well. Simply doing what is prudent and to some may seem boring is actually usually extremely effective. Let me expand on this for a second and ask the question. Have you ever played Monopoly? I know I have. In fact, we have family game night and I love it. It's one of the things I'm teaching my son, Brooks. He's 6 years old and he still just really wants to focus on the trinkets that you use, let alone the actual real estate that's going on. I digress. But what happens in the game of Monopoly, even if you haven't played it in a long time, you know this. What happens when you circle the board? You collect $200, right? Well, what does that $200 represent? Wages. It's just your time for circling the board. Do you remember anyone actually winning the game by just circling the board and collecting their $200? I played it a lot. I can't, in my mind, think of someone who's actually won the game by just doing that. You have to invest in the properties and the hotels. So to win in the real life Monopoly market, you have to invest in the market. And by waiting and trying to find that right portfolio and that right time and that right stock, all the stuff we've been talking about so far, just makes you keep circling that Monopoly board. So again, my biggest advocacy here around finding that partner, that trusted advisor, and it doesn't have to be One Capital Management, by the way. This is not a all roads leads to One Capital show, but understanding that your investment advisor and your financial planner need to go hand in hand. They need to integrate because planning and investments, as you heard me say on this show many times, they go hand in hand.
Stay connected. Get frequent updates on the show. Follow Brad Barrett and Make Your Money Matter on most social media platforms. And catch full episodes of Make Your Money Matter streaming now on our YouTube channel. To schedule your no-obligation appointment, go to onecapital.com or call 805-410-5454.
Putting off saving until attaining an ideal career situation is number 5. All right, number 5. We don't want to put off a certain investment or a certain strategy just because we're waiting for some perfect thing to happen in our life. I've had a lot of conversations, particularly in my career, with entrepreneurs and different high-level executives that actually might be on leave, kind of looking for that next opportunity or next company, and they start putting off savings until they're actually at that new job. So an entrepreneur will say, I'm gonna wait until I get my business underway and then I'll start, investing the profits in that way. And the counter argument to that is they're actually investing in the business. Okay, fine. The executive who is leaving one job, maybe wanting to go into the entrepreneur space or is waiting for that next job opportunity, says, I'm gonna wait and fund my IRA or my next retirement plan because I wanna wait for that next job. And we have to be really careful here because that time gap could be a month, could be a year, could be 2 years. And especially with young professionals, when they come to me through the radio program and the podcast and this show, and they come to us here at the firm, and I always encourage them to save as much money as possible into their company's 401k plan or their corporate retirement plan. A common retort is, I'm gonna hold off on saving for retirement until I get better situated. I mentioned this a little earlier. Like my cash flow, it isn't the greatest, and I anticipate being able to save a lot more when I get promoted. This is the wrong mindset to have. When you're young, with fewer responsibilities and financial commitments, that is generally the best time to save for 2 reasons. One, you have more cash flow if you really look at it and avoid some of the things you may think you want to do but really shouldn't be doing. And 2, time. Time is on your hand. Putting money away earlier on in your career allows those dollars to benefit from compound interest, dollar cost averaging, all stuff we'll talk about here on the show and we talk about here at the firm. So decades of letting that money grow can meaningfully benefit your financial future. So keeping with that comment for a second, I've always said this, thankfully many corporate retirement plans incorporate something like little nudges, if you will, that help for employees to save more seamlessly. And these nudges include automatic enrollment, automatic escalation of the employee's contributions and things like that. Those listening and watching right now who have retirement plans have probably seen these things. Doing nothing and allowing these automations to work, their magic is actually a great decision. You actually, believe it or not, nowadays may not have to do much if you just agree to understanding that you want to start contributing to your retirement. To round out the list of these 6 things to avoid when it comes to investing is holding off until you're in a comfortable life situation. No different than item number 1 in my example about finding my wife and for those out there trying to find that partner for you. Because a lot of people I meet with are holding off until they're actually comfortable in their life and what's going on. And I've spoken to many who, as an example, are not married yet, back to that example, and they're kind of waiting to get their financial affairs in order. And the reality is that may actually never happen. We don't know what tomorrow holds. So it may not happen until, like in my example of a marriage, you actually getting engaged and moving toward a wedding date. I've also noticed in my career and in life that as you start moving in a direction, things start falling into place. So staying stagnant is probably not the best thing for you when it comes to investing. And that's kind of the takeaway here from all of these 6 items. But this last one about waiting for your perfect, life situation and the events in one person's personal life are often another deterrent to getting started, whether it's, again, buying a home or going on a special vacation, or maybe even worse, like a sickness or a death. I mean, there's always personal reasons to put off your finances on the back burner. Unfortunately, the perils of being alive are constant. Waiting for your life to normalize is really a recipe for inaction. So similar to the nudges that I mentioned that are built into corporate retirement plans, you can also build automations into your own personal financial affairs by setting small amounts of money to go into an investment account and what we call regular intervals, a strategy that we talked about often called dollar cost averaging. I mean, you do it right now, you don't even realize it. You're contributing to your 401k plan. When you get paid, for example, you may have $100 or $200 sent to your 401k plan, you're dollar cost averaging into the market. Similarly, we can help put strategies in place into your own personal financial affairs for after-tax savings, whether it's $50 a month or $100 a month, whatever it is, where you can help align that with you to make sure that you're building up your liquidity so you have the cash on hand, as well as letting your investments working for the future. And when you talk about these small automations, you probably won't miss this modest amount that we're talking about when it comes to putting into an investment. And even though it may be small, it actually has a ripple effect, something we'll talk about in future episodes here. You can accumulate wealth slowly, and that's okay. Over time, it builds. So here's the takeaway. Don't get hindered on the sidelines by fear or anxiety. Get a plan in place, stick to that plan, and let an advisor, someone you're working with, maintain that plan for years to come. Look, as I said before, it doesn't have to be One Capital Management. This isn't a show where it's all roads lead to One Capital, but find that advisor, find that counsel to build trust. And in fact, many employers have referrals to financial advisors, but most people just don't ask. Again, if it's not us, find someone you can trust. All right, so it's that time of the show where we're gonna answer your questions. If you have a question or topic you'd like me to address, you can leave a comment or question in the comment section below, or if it's something a bit more personal and you just wanna ask me directly, you can go to our About page on this channel and send us an email. We will always keep the questions I read here anonymous, so you never have to worry about your name being shared or used, but we'd love to hear from you. So the question that came in today actually had a lot to do with dollar cost averaging, a topic I was actually bringing up today on some of the 6 items to avoid. You actually want to consistently and systematically contribute to your savings and your investments. And so they basically asked to expand a little bit on dollar cost averaging. So here's how to answer that. If you think about it, what's the number one asset class for any retiree? I don't care if you're listening here and you're 45, 50, or 60. I mean, ultimately, the by and large stats are that 401ks, retirement plans, or employer-sponsored retirement plans are the largest, we'll call it asset class for retirees. Why? It's not because necessarily it's the best investment vehicle. It's not because they have necessarily the best investment funds. It's usually, and this is coming from an advisor of nearly 20 years in this business, it's usually because it's the one area that most people will consistently, on a disciplined approach, invest into. That's dollar cost averaging. Whether you get paid biweekly or every other Friday, as an example, you're either getting paid 24 times or 26 times a year. Think about that for a second. Whether that's $50 a month, $100 a month, or maybe $800 a paycheck, whatever it might be, if you're maxing out, you're doing that in that area consistently, systematically, and on a disciplined approach. That's why dollar cost averaging works. Dollar cost averaging is systematically and automatically, on a disciplined approach, putting in fresh capital every 2 weeks into your investment account. Over time, that smooths out volatility. What's the one thing you know about investing? Buy low, sell high. It is able to smooth out investment returns over time because you're constantly adding to it. So you're in this contributory phase, what I call the accumulation phase, for 30 or 40 years, and that's all dollar cost averaging. So to expand on dollar cost averaging, it's the ability on a disciplined approach to put in fresh money into your investments every 2 weeks, every month, whatever the amount might be, stick to it, because that's how you get all of the great investment components working for you. Compound interest, all of the items we mentioned about, making sure that we're investing, finding that right portfolio. And really today, we focused on the things to avoid. We want to avoid market timing. We want to avoid waiting for that perfect situation or that perfect stock to arise or the perfect portfolio or the perfect life event and the perfect life situation. We don't want perfection to get in our way. And believe it or not, it's a great question for today's show around dollar cost averaging is the way to avoid the time game where you're just waiting for this unicorn of a situation to arise. Dollar cost averaging allows you to systematically contribute to your investing, and it allows fresh capital to buy every 2 weeks or every month the same portfolio at different prices while also having active management and rebalancing going on, something we recommend here at One Capital Management as well. So again, if you have a question or comment you'd like me to read here, leave it in the comments section, or you can email us. Again, you can email us in the About page on our channel. Now, before we go, if you found anything helpful today and want to learn more about One Capital Management, our firm, and the Make Your Money Matter show, you can visit us at onecapital.com, or you can actually scan the QR code that's on the screen with your smartphone, and that'll be able to get you there. You can also call or text us. We want to help. Listen, there's no pressure here. We don't treat people like a number. In fact, we value relationships. It's the lifeblood of what we do. So Click, call, or text us today. And if you're not following us on social media, you should be. We're sharing great information on all of our social media platforms. And as I often say, if you enjoy the show, share it with someone you like. And if you don't like it, I guess share it with someone you don't like. But until next time, always remember, make your money matter.
The information in this show is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration a listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.